Ahoy! Amazon Games just dropped a massive surprise. They announced again that there will be a Lord of the Rings MMO. If you have been following Amazon Games since the start, since before New World, you knew that this is what they were originally working on and it was cancelled. So this is a bit confusing, and I also just told you that they're not working on an MMO a few weeks ago. So let me explain how this all makes sense and what's going on here. The first sentence of the article actually is hilarious. Amazon Games and Embracer Group, through its wholly owned subsidiary Middle-earth Enterprises, part of the operative group Free Mode, today announced an agreement for Amazon Games, blah blah blah. So they are gonna make a Lord of the Rings MMO specifically, and this MMO will be based on The Hobbit and The Lord of the Rings. They mention later in the article as well, it will specifically not be based on the new Amazon series that is also set in Middle-earth. And this will be made in Orange County, which is also the location where New World is being developed. This is apparently already the second time that AGS and Embracer Group are working together. They also are working on Tomb Raider together, so that's another collaboration of that type. And this comes at a time where AGS is developing New World, is somewhat working on Lost Ark at least, on the western version of that, and are also planning to publish Throne and Liberty, Blue Protocol, and that Tomb Raider game as well. And then they also have other subsidiaries that are working on other games. So a crazy amount of things that are in the pipeline somehow. But how come this game is back now? The press release for this article tells us a little bit more. There's first of all an info bit about Embracer Group. So Embracer Group, some of you may be familiar with them. They're basically a massive company that invests in tons of different games and is kind of swallowing up large portions of the market. So something that multiple parties are doing at the moment effectively. According to their article, they now have 135 internal game development studios and 16,200 employees. And this very same Embracer Group bought Middle-earth Enterprises in 2022. Middle-earth Enterprises, along with marketing themselves around being very sustainable, are focused on producing and licensing films, merchandise, and stage productions based on Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. And this all makes sense in the context of Amazon also having the new rights for the new series as well. So they are kind of in touch, at least, I suppose. But Middle-earth Enterprises isn't the only party that is involved when it comes to Tolkien stories, because there's also Tolkien Estate, and they had some legal battles in the past, specifically over things like games and digital media, which were not covered under some old licenses. And they have some agreement since 2017, which would have been before Amazon announced their work on the MMO, on the Lord of the Rings MMO originally. But still, as you can see, for example, in this article from Game Informer, the MMO was cancelled in 2021. And there was a lot of talk about trouble around it and complications and whatnot. And a little bit later, we actually got another article about it. The explanation was we had a deal with a Hong Kong-based company, Liu. I think it would have been great to work with them, Hartman told the publication, but they later got sold to Tencent and it got very complicated. This is probably because Tencent just is a massive company in itself as well that also develops games, so they may have just said, you know what, maybe you guys are not going to be the ones to develop the Lord of the Rings game, and we might just do that ourselves. The article says Amazon Games could have reworked its plans to include Tencent, and the two attempted to negotiate such a collaboration, but Hartman says that those negotiations dragged on for a long time and the studio eventually decided to call it quits. He also said we're too big companies to really turn into partners doing a property when they own the license and we develop the game, which is interesting because now they're kind of doing it with a pretty massive company anyways, but I guess it's going to be more the development being on Amazon's side. So maybe that's kind of solving that a little bit, but it's definitely going to be interesting how this plays out this time. I am sure though they wouldn't have announced it again that early if they weren't 100% sure about this. But how does this all make sense, and also how does New World play into this? So first we need to understand what the studios at Amazon are actually doing. According to Amazon's own announcement about Lord of the Rings, so this is very up to date, they have 4 studios and teams in Seattle, Orange County, San Diego, and Montreal. In early April of this year, Amazon actually had a bunch of layoffs that also hit Amazon Games, and that specifically affected the San Diego studio. The San Diego studio, as far as we are aware and if the rumors are true, were working on a sci-fi MMO. This studio was led by John Smedley, who stepped down in early 2023, so this seemed to have been his pet project, more or less, and therefore that studio kind of got redirected. In the context of the layoffs, they also said that many of the workers would be reassigned to projects that fit its strategic focus, so it's likely that the employees that I thought went mostly to New World and the new MOBA also potentially went to the new MMO if those deals were already finalized then. They did specifically mention that the teams in Irvine and Montreal would continue to grow, which makes a lot of sense now. So in case you aren't aware, Irvine and the Orange County studio, that's the same studio. It's just that Irvine is in Orange County area. And this is now the studio that is working both on New World as well as the Lord of the Rings MMO. Meanwhile, the Montreal studio is the one that is working at a MOBA. This seems to be unchanged as far as we can tell. In fact, they made a new job search posting for a 3D environment artist yesterday for the Montreal studio, specifically once again saying, yes, this is a MOBA. So that is definitely still in the works as well. What's unclear to me is where this leaves the team that is in Seattle. It's not really shown anywhere what this team is doing, what they're working on, but maybe it is also just a small team, because whenever there is a job listing for the Seattle team, they say you can also work from San Diego. And it seems like both of those locations are not their primary ones when it comes to game development at the moment. Maybe they're more for support, maybe they are there for Lost Ark and stuff like that, I don't know. But anyways, the main work seems to be happening at Irvine, and then the MOBA is in Montreal. Now, while Amazon not too long ago had some company-wide layoffs, I do feel like they seem to be more willing to invest into their games department at the moment. On the publisher side, they're being much more aggressive, and then they're now doing this new project along with multiple projects that they already have running, so I would think that there is more money going into this overall. What's a big question in the context of the Lord of the Rings MMO is, how far along is this? Because we know they were working on it before and then had to stop, so how much of that is still usable? How much are they possibly considering to use but may end up not using anyways because maybe the engine that they started on is not right anymore? Maybe that's too outdated now. We don't know what engine this will be on. We don't know if this is going to be the same format as New World basically or something completely different. So there are a lot of questions here that we can't answer at this point. And I really wonder if they are planning to make a significantly different MMO from New World, or basically just make New World with a Lord of the Rings packaging, which I could see working quite well, to be honest, because you could appeal both to current New World players as well as Lord of the Rings fans, and the combat system in New World is, in my opinion, one of the best that we have in the MMO scene. So who knows, maybe we'll see something really cool come out of this, but it is not very clear if or how or when this will work out. For all we know, it could take many years until this project sees the light of day, and who knows how the game environment overall looks by then, because there is also the Riot MMO somewhere on the horizon, even though that's kind of fractured a bit with the departure of Ghostcrawler. As such, it's also incredibly difficult to say how and if this will affect New World at all. If they're planning to make the combat similar, or maybe use the same or similar engine or something, then it could actually be that they put more money into New World, give them more resources in order for them to utilize that to make the game better in a way that will work for the Lord of the Rings MMO and take that as a learned experience. So that could actually benefit New World, at least short term, but we don't know if that will be the case, or again, if it's going to be a completely different game with a completely different playstyle. In case this ends up meaning that we're basically getting New World 2 in 3 years with a Lord of the Rings skin over it, I wouldn't be all too mad. I think that would be a great game to have, so no complaints on my side there. Generally, we do know that many MMOs are in development for a very long time, so I wonder, again, how far along this one is, how long it will still take, and how much it'll use New World's knowledge and data to build upon. Assuming they are not continuing with the old code of the original project as much, there would definitely be a benefit in basically starting from clean slate and not having as much leftover data in the game that doesn't really belong. We'll find out. I'll of course let you know when we know more, but I think this is definitely a very exciting announcement because it means that Amazon is going to stay invested in MMOs, and I think generally that is likely going to be beneficial for New World, at least until the Lord of the Rings MMO comes out. My dream scenario would be both games coexisting but having different update cycles. So whenever there's something cool happening in one game, the other one has a bit of downtime, and then you get a big patch in the other game, so there's always something to do in one of them. Once we know more, I will update you, so consider subscribing and clicking the bell if you're interested. Tomorrow we'll also talk about light gear loadouts and what I would recommend with shocking fortification and elemental aversion, and we'll probably also very soon talk about Diablo a little bit and what my feels about the beta were. If you want early trading tips for the next patches, consider supporting me on Patreon. Thanks to my patrons who already do that. Also, thank you for watching. SLOTH out.